So you want to learn how to set up cards inside F1 2022. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into a custom setup just like this. We're going to go into aerodynamics. So the difference in aerodynamics is that you can have high downforce or low downforce. So if you're racing around Monza, which is a high speed track, you want low downforce like this. You always want to keep the rear aero a little bit higher than the front. But then if you're racing around somewhere like Monaco, which needs a lot of downforce on it, you want to push it quite far up like that. You can play with it just as you want, but that's the difference in aerodynamics. The difference is when you're going down a straight, say somewhere like Circuit of the Americas, and you have that big long straight at the back, you don't really want high downforce because it will give you a much faster top speed if you've got low aero front and back. But then you will sacrifice stability in the corners, so you have to make it in between where you like it on the car. Everybody will be different where they like it. So that's why we do custom setups. Stick around till the end of the video because I'm going to show you a trick of how to get fast setups from eSport pros. So stick around for that. Next comes the transmission settings. The adjustment on throttle is not that problematic this year compared to previous years. Keep the value low around 60 to 65% for stable but fast corner exits. The off throttle adjustments on the other hand is rather crucial, as the lower value here will guarantee you a much better turning response. Value between 50 and 55% is optimal. So when it comes to suspension and geometry, we're going to try and trick the system. Front camber, we want the least amount, so we want to go to 2.5 right at the top. You can adjust it a tiny bit if you want. Rear camber, we're going to want the least, which is 1. You can have more if you want, but we're not going to do that. We're going to keep it around 2.5 and 1. You can move it down a tiny bit, but that's where I say you want to keep it. Front toe and rear toe, the reason we're doing this is we want to keep the tyres as straight as possible for high speed. That's what we want to do there. On the suspension setting, we want to keep it as soft as possible. The reason we keep it as soft as possible is because we're going to be going over curbs and things like that. So we want to be able to go over the curb without the car bouncing around. If you have it hard, it's going to be really harsh. And when you go over a curb or you go around a long sweeping corner, it's not really going to be great. Or you go over a bump, it's going to bounce around, and we don't want that. We want to keep it as soft as possible to keep the ride as smooth as possible to give you the best amount of traction. So regarding brakes, I suggest that you use 100% and 50% on all of your setups. The reason why we use 100% brake pressure is because I'm going to brake really hard when we're coming into corners, and I want as much pressure on those brakes as possible to brake as quickly as possible. On the front brake bias, we're just going to use 50% to put it 50% rear, 50% front, so it's always in the middle. Regarding tyre pressure, the higher tyre pressure that you have means the less tyre is going to be in contact with the ground, which means that you want to keep it as high as possible to keep the less contact on the ground, giving you a better top speed, but you don't want to have it too high because there's less tyre contact on the ground. It's going to reduce stability. So you want to keep it as high as possible, but if you feel like the car is too unstable, then move it down a tiny bit and keep moving it until you find a place that you feel comfortable. But I personally keep it quite high on all 4 tyres. So now I'm going to show you a trick to get fast setups for every single track inside F1 2022. First thing, let's go into time trial, and then we're going to click F1 2022. We're going to pick any car, doesn't really matter. We're going to pick any track that you want. Doesn't matter what track you pick, but we're going to look for a setup for Canada. So we're just going to go into the garage in Canada. So now we're in the garage in Canada. We're just going to press X to go to session info. Then we're going to sit up here. And what we're going to do is going to go to custom setup. We want to make sure it says yes. And then on assists, we want to make sure it's got no assists on whatsoever, which means that it's guaranteed to be a fast setup because they're not using any assists to get a fast time. So we're just going to pick the second one there. He's done a 109.2. We're just going to click on that one. And then we're just going to go load setup. Load it, apply rival setup. Okay. And now we have that setup on our car. So we just go back and we go into session info again, and then we go across the setup and we go custom setup and just press select, go into our custom setup, and now you can see we are using his custom setup. He's got 2.5 camber on the front. On the rear camber, he's got -2 suspension. There is all his suspension. Brakes 50 and 100, perfectly fine. And then he's got maxed PSI on the rear and a little less on the front, halfway. And then all you want to do is you want to press Y, save load setup. You want to go in, you want to press save car setup, and you want to go in there, and then you want to press save. and just enter a name. So you would just put Canada in there, and then once you've done that, you'll have that setup saved for anywhere on the game. So if you're in Korea, you'll be able to use that setup on your Canada race in your career. So that is the trick to get fast setups inside F1 2022. If you like that, give me a like and a subscribe, and check out my other videos.